Welcome to Wednesday, April 3rd. I'm John Weigell here with Mark Dent, and this is the Hustle Daily Show. Before we get started, we're happy to announce that the Hustle newsletter received a nomination for a Webby Award. Be sure to follow the link in the description to vote. Speaking of the web, larger streaming services are slowly offloading chunks of their content libraries. This has been going on for quite some time, but now as the pressure's on for many to achieve profitability, things are heating up. So how do they save money by chopping off content, and what does the future look like for each app's content? We'll get to that in a bit, but first let's give you the hits and headlines today in business and tech. All right, starting us off, Yahoo is acquiring AI news app Artifact, built by Instagram's co-founders, for an undisclosed amount, bringing its proprietary tech to millions of readers. Next, you can now use ChatGPT without an account, something I've been trying to do for months. OpenAI will no longer ask you to log in to use the tool, but users without accounts will lack certain features, like saving and sharing chats or using custom instructions. All right, moving over to the airline industry, United Airlines is asking its pilots to take voluntary unpaid time off in May. The airline said that Boeing's recent problems had led to aircraft deliveries arriving late, reducing flight forecasts during United's busiest summer travel season in 10 years. So obviously there's a lot of drama going on with airlines. Mark, what do you make of United's stake in this?
Right. It's just like another story in the ongoing saga of air travel since the pandemic. We know that workers at airports, they're overworked, which makes the logistics actually on the runways just a little bit trickier. We know, of course, Boeing has had their share of problems. Airlines have had trouble with pilots in their hours. Even though they might have enough pilots, now they don't have enough planes because of Boeing. It's just like these kinks just cannot seem to get worked out.
Yeah, and this continuous supply issue, it's about supplying actual working planes to these airlines, and those delays are causing more delays, which are probably going to cause a lot of people delays at the airport. So, we can all look forward to that, I guess.
Yeah, I'm thinking of booking my summer flights now after reading that story, and also booking them for 7 a.m. because I feel like it's much less likely to see a delay.
Moving on to Tesla. Tesla's stock dipped 7% on Tuesday following news that it delivered 386.8 thousand vehicles in Q1, and that's short of an estimated 450,000. Causes there include factory shutdowns in Germany, poor demand in China, and an increased demand for plug-in hybrids. And finally, a proposed California law would give workers the right to ignore work communication outside of work hours. Similar laws already exist in countries including France, Ireland, and Portugal, but it seems like this is making its way very slowly into the United States. Mark, what do you think about this law?
Well, it's interesting because there are so many companies that are, multinational. And so I assume that those companies who have a presence in France or Portugal, for instance, are sort of abiding by it, at least to maybe some extent already, which may show a blueprint for how it could be done. But nevertheless, I just think that this could be an extremely difficult bill to actually pass or frankly to regulate.
Yeah.
But, the work culture in the US is just different than those countries. And I see it just getting a lot of blowback, certainly from bosses, but I think even from some workers. California, that said, they're the ones who are proposing this. It tends to be that what happens in California often happens everywhere else eventually. So if they pass this landmark law, then a lot of people are probably going to have to do it too.
Yeah. Yeah, and you made a great point there about how this would be regulated exactly, because I don't know if my boss sends me a Slack at 8 p.m. and there's this law that says that they can't after 6. What am I going to do? Am I going to report them to the authorities?
Exactly. It would certainly take a lot of courage, I think, from an employee to turn somebody in.
Yeah. Possibly at their detriment. Who knows? All right, going on to the main story today. Today's top story is about how many big streaming outlets are removing content from their libraries. Now, this has been going on for at least a year, but there seems to be a heightened desperation for profitability by many of these companies. So, Mark, just to start off, why are a lot of these streamers offloading content to begin with?
Well, John, you really essentially mentioned it there. Basically no one has been profitable in the streaming business except for Netflix, which has even had a problem or two here a couple years ago, but has kind of righted the ship.
Right.
it's expensive to have all of these shows. And so the different streamers, particularly some of the more niche ones, Peacock or Paramount, the ones that a lot of people don't have, are really finding it hard to continue to support these robust libraries.
Sure. Yeah. And the ones you mentioned as well, Peacock and like Warner Bros. Discovery and stuff, they have these insanely huge libraries that a streamer like Netflix used to have before all these streaming services started popping up and kind of reclaiming their old shows. But it seemed to have kind of leveled off here, where Netflix kind of is able to still purchase content from other providers and put it on their streaming network. So it seems like we are kind of at this point where every streaming service was trying to be a catch-all or just a wealth of every kind of content you could find, but maybe now that's not necessarily good for them anymore.
And I think Netflix is the only one who might be able to continue pulling it off, because they do have a lot of their own shows. They've gotten back more into licensing other people's shows after that had kind of gone out of style for a while, when those other networks wanted to keep their own shows. And, they just still, I think, have the user base to be like the new kind of homepage for people who want to watch TV. I think Max is still kind of trying to attempt that. When I go to Max, it's always showing me that some basketball game is on or some baseball game is on instead of the shows that I actually watch, which I find interesting. And certainly they've pivoted, frankly, away from being more of a niche kind of network, which is what it was. HBO Max, it was prestige. It was like The Sopranos and these great dramas. And now just it's everything. And I think that that's going to be a really interesting sort of case to see if there can be two kind of catch-alls. But yeah, these other ones are clearly not going to be going in that direction.
That's the interesting part of it, is that a lot of these other streaming services, the smaller ones or the more recent ones, are kind of becoming more niche. And that model is one that you would not think that a company like Paramount or Peacock would go towards. But a lot of smaller streaming services have seen quite a lot of success with that, with just concentrating on a very specific type or genre of content, just like Shudder. I see ads for Shudder all the time. They only do horror. Apparently they're doing pretty well. So maybe a lot of these bigger streamers are taking notes from these smaller, more niche areas.
But that's Shudder. We're talking about Paramount here, and we're talking about NBC Universal, which are truly massive companies and whose businesses have depended for years on having these shows with an enormous viewer base that they can sell ads to. And now they don't have that. And so they thought they could have something for streaming where they'd get a similar base, and they aren't. And so I think by them going niche, it's like a very good PR-ish way for them to say, oh, we're pivoting to this. We're going to be your new home for something very specific. But I just don't know how that model can work for them in the long run when they need to make gobs and gobs of money. Maybe what they can do is turn themselves into some niche category that will be very appealing to one of the bigger streamers so they can go and buy it and have some kind of successful merger.
Definitely. That's a great point. And isn't this all kind of funny when you think about it, that we have all these streaming services and, we used to have cable in which every channel you kind of got something a bit different. And now it seems like with streaming services, that same thing is happening all of a sudden, where streaming services are doing their own thing. And, Amazon's really big into the action stuff. Apple TV Plus is doing a lot of horror, sci-fi. Disney Plus is all for family. So all of them have their own identities now. And I guess we're just kind of back at cable, it feels like.
Yeah, except it's just much more inconvenient to flip from channel to channel, basically.
Yeah, and expensive.
I mean, they always warned us, like back in the day, as in 10, 15 years ago, when people would say they wanted to see the end of the bundle. Like, it's like, why do I have to subsidize ESPN if I never watch it, or some cable news network if I never watch it? And then there'd always be these studies, by these professors who would say, actually, you're going to rue the day when you don't have the bundle. I think they were right.
Yeah, it seems like it. And, it seems like it's getting more expensive to stream shows, which is why we're seeing this content offloading by many of these platforms. But what do you think is the future with this? Do you think we can see a lot more content we have loved or watched leaving, and all these platforms trying to either, as you mentioned, go more broad or go more niche?
I think we are going to see a lot of these shows kind of leave, and we certainly have over the last couple of years. For Max in particular, when Discovery merged with Warner Brothers after AT&T kind of got rid of it, there was a culling, almost as soon as Discovery took over. These shows can be pretty expensive. There's residuals, there's licensing involved. The licensing can be for hundreds of thousands of dollars per episode. So, for long series, you're talking, in the millions of dollars. Wow. So I think a lot of these streamers will just decide to stop renewing a lot of the shows. And so we've had, to some extent, kind of like the golden age of TV with all these prestige series over the last, 20 years or so. And then I think over the last few years, we've had like the glut of TV where we've had everything we wanted, some of it good, some of it not. Yeah. And I think we're just going to see the number of programs available just decline. And it's in part from the fact that these streamers are just not profitable and frankly are nowhere near profitability or seem to have, in my opinion, much of a plan for getting there. On top of the fact that, there was just a writer's strike last year and an actor's strike. So there's just really, I think, going to be slim pickings compared to what we're used to. And if it is only Netflix or HBO Max that ends up being really powerful while all these others continue to struggle, then you're just going to see, I think, less and less shows on for us to watch.
Yeah, I think that was a great sum up of the situation we're currently in. And I'm excited to see what the next year holds and how many streaming services I can unsubscribe from.
I'm so badly wanting to get rid of Netflix, yet I hold on to it. I've had it for like 10 years now. So
that's what I do too. I just have it and I'm like, I don't use this. Why do I need this? And then I don't know.
Only for Love is Blind, Yeah. But that's coming on like every 4 months now. So
I know. They're really churning it out. Now they got Love is Blind like Germany, Japan.
Yeah.
They really keep me in it with that one. Yeah. All right, and that'll do it for us today. Thanks for tuning into the Hustle Daily Show. And you can head to the link in the description for this podcast to vote for the Hustle newsletter in the Webby Awards. We're a proud part of the HubSpot Podcast Network. Our editor today is Robert Hartwig, and our executive producer is Darren Clark. We've got a lot more tech and business coverage in our newsletter. If you're not subscribed, go get yourself signed up at thehustle.co/email, and we'll see you tomorrow.